Hi, this is Emily Leiphart of Art from the Heart, and I'm back with another Winnie and Walter video. I'll be creating a clean and simple Chinese New Year card featuring 3 of the January release stamp sets. The first one is called Scenery, the Party Hangover. The punny name alone sets it apart from other background border sets, and I know I'll be using it a lot. This next set is called The Big, the Bold, and Party. It's another must-have sentiment set that you need for your collection. It's twice the size of a standard 4x6 stamp set, and you can see the difference next to the Big, the Bold, and the Happy, which I'll also be using on my card. The third new set I'm using is the Party, which was featured on my last video for Winnie and Walter. It's also a 6x8 stamp set, and I've barely scratched the surface of it, even after having made 2 cards. As you can see, there's so much mileage in these sets. You're going to love them. I'll be doing all my stamping and heat embossing on this front panel, and right now it's cut at 1/4 of an inch smaller than the A2 card base. I do trim it down a couple of millimeters at the end when I tuck a gray mat in behind it. When I first saw those lanterns from the party, I knew I wanted to make a card for Chinese New Year, which is on February 19th this year. The first thing I do is select phrases to create my custom sentiment. The large scripted wishes word is from the Big, the Bold, and Party. The secondary sentiment, from all of us, is from the same set. To specifically make this a New Year card, I'm using those words from the Big, the Bold, and the Happy. Continuing with my layout, I'm going to use the largest banner from Scenery, the Party Hangover. I'm also going to add both the lanterns and tassels from the Big, the Bold, and Party. Now that I know my layout, I can start stamping. I use my embossing bag on the entire panel since I'll be heat embossing everything. I ink up the banner with Versamark ink and stamp it. I pour glitter gold embossing powder and heat set it. I'm going to stamp a second banner, and the right hand bit didn't quite reach the edge of the card, so I re-stamped that quickly. Now I pour glitter silver embossing powder and heat set that. It's a bit tricky to use different colors in such close proximity to each other. If you overheat embossing powder, it can either bubble or burn, or do both, which is not quite so appealing. At this point, I go over the panel again with my embossing bag. I've handled it and probably rubbed off most of the powder from before. Next, I ink up the big scripted wishes word, and I do stamp it a little lower than in the original layout since I don't want it to interfere with the hanging lanterns. I heat emboss this in rouge embossing powder. I love this bright, pretty red. When I'm doing a lot of heat embossing, I always like to add a bit of heat to the backside in an effort to unwarp the cardstock. If I'm embossing larger surface areas, it also ensures that all of the embossing powder is melted. Now we're almost halfway through the stamping, and I'm going to line up the secondary sentiments using both my grid mat and acrylic block. I stamped both secondary sentiments before applying charcoal embossing powder, and I think I should have applied it after each line so that the powder would stick better. Giving the Versamark ink time to dry, even if a little bit, isn't really a good thing. As you can see, I had to pour powder on it 3 times to get the coverage I did. It wasn't sticking to the ink very well. I'm going to use my embossing bag again before stamping the lanterns. It looks like I'm stamping the lantern twice because I have the tassel on the flip side of the acrylic block. I've done this because the smaller lantern is on the other acrylic block, and I'll be using the big lantern again on the left side of the card. Now I'm nestling the smaller lantern and tassel in the empty space above the sentiment. This fills in the design. This time I stamped 2 lanterns before applying glitter gold embossing powder because it was a much quicker process than having to line up sentiments, so the ink didn't have as much time to dry. I didn't like how that small lantern appeared to be hanging in midair, so I grabbed my Versamark marker, the marker version of the ink pad, and quickly drew a little line to attach it to the banner. Before applying heat, I'm going to stamp the other big lantern on the left side of the card. This time I'll be heating almost the entire panel, so I need to hold it with tweezers to avoid burning my fingers. Now that all the stamping is done, I can start assembling my card. I've cut a red A2 card base, which is going to highlight the main part of the sentiment. I hold the panel on top, and this is where I realize that it needs an extra layer to make it pop. I trimmed down the white panel so there's enough space around the edges to accommodate a gray mat. I cut the gray mat at the same size as the white panel, which is 1/4 inch smaller than the card base. This means I need to trim down the white panel a couple of millimeters. When that's done, I can adhere all the pieces together. The white panel goes flat against the gray mat, and then the gray mat is popped onto the card base with foam tape. Now my card is done. Before I go, I want to invite you all to a very special event happening next Wednesday, February 4th. I've organized a video hop to celebrate a couple of milestones, and I've invited 9 of your favorite video artists as well as 8 incredible sponsors. I hope to see you there. Please refer to the supply links below if you're interested in any of the products I used in this video. You can also visit my blog for stills and more information about my work. Thanks so much for watching.